The Imperial envoy sliced through the dark void of space, its polished hull reflecting the dim glow of Cthari Prime's twin moons. Aboard the vessel, Ambassador Darius Voss stood near the observation deck, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the approaching alien world. "This is a mistake," Captain Rail, Mercer muttered beside him. His military uniform, crisp and adorned with the insignia of the Imperial Diplomatic Guard, barely concealed the tension in his stance. Voss sighed but did not turn. "A necessary one. The Emperor wants peace before war. If we can reason with them." "They're insects," Mercer interrupted, his voice a low growl. "Predators that see anything not of their kind as prey. This peace talk is an illusion." Voss finally faced him, his steel-gray eyes unwavering. "If that's true, Captain, then we will learn it soon enough." The ship descended smoothly through Cthari Prime's atmosphere, guided by automated landing protocols provided by the aliens. Below them, the capital city unfolded, sprawling hive-like structures interwoven with chitinous bridges, all bathed in the eerie green glow of bioluminescent fungi. It was an unsettling sight, but Voss stepped forward with unwavering purpose as the docking ramp extended. A delegation of Cthari warriors waited at the landing platform, their obsidian exoskeletons gleaming under the dim light. Towering figures with elongated limbs and razor-edged mandibles, they carried ceremonial spears in a mock display of civility. At their center stood warlord Seitharuk, his crest of crimson chitin marking him as ruler of this world. "Ambassador Voss." Seitharuk's voice clicked and rasped, a guttural approximation of human speech. "Your arrival is noted." Voss inclined his head in polite acknowledgement. "The Emperor extends his greetings and hopes this meeting will usher in a new era of understanding." Seitharuk's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. "Come, then, let us feast." Mercer stayed close to Voss as they were led into the towering citadel. The interior was cavernous, the walls lined with organic growths that pulsed softly, emitting a faint musk. Long tables were arranged in concentric circles, each laden with unfamiliar dishes, some still moving. Seated across from Seitharuk, Voss maintained a composed expression as he lifted a goblet offered by a Cthari servant. The liquid within shimmered, an iridescent blue. "A drink of unity," the warlord intoned. Mercer, ever watchful, subtly scanned the faces of the Cthari warriors around them. Their movements were too controlled, their stance too rigid. Something was wrong. Voss raised the goblet, but hesitated. "To unity," he said carefully. He did not drink. Seitharuk's mandibles flared. The torchlight reflected in his multifaceted eyes as he gave a slow, deliberate nod. And then chaos erupted. The Cthari warriors sprang to life, spears whipping forward with inhuman speed. Mercer reacted first, knocking Voss sideways as a jagged blade speared through the air where his chest had been. The ambassador hit the floor hard as Mercer's blaster cleared its holster, barking rapid shots into the nearest Cthari. Screams and gunfire filled the chamber. The Imperial guards, vastly outnumbered, fought with brutal efficiency, but it was a slaughter. Voss scrambled to his feet, reaching for the communicator at his belt. "Admiral Dorn." A Cthari blade slashed across his forearm, cutting deep. He fell back with a gasp, blood staining his pristine diplomat's robes. Mercer was at his side in an instant, dragging him toward the exit. "Stay with me, Ambassador." Lieutenant Eric Hale, one of Mercer's men, cut a path through the enemy with controlled bursts of plasma fire. "We have to move, now." A Cthari warrior lunged at him, its serrated claws catching Hale's shoulder. He roared in pain, shoving his rifle into the creature's throat and pulling the trigger. It collapsed in a spray of thick amber ichor. The retreat was desperate. Mercer, Hale, and 2 remaining guards managed to drag Voss through the winding corridors of the citadel. Behind them, the sounds of their comrades being overwhelmed rang through the air. Almost there, Hale grunted. The Imperial envoy was in sight, its exterior lights casting harsh white against the dark. The ship's automated defense system activated, turrets swiveling to life as Cthari soldiers pursued them. Explosive rounds shredded through carapaces, forcing the enemy back just enough. Mercer shoved Voss up the ramp, but as Hale turned to cover their retreat, a massive Kthari warrior impaled him through the stomach. The lieutenant's breath hitched, his rifle slipping from numb fingers. "Hale!" Mercer's snarl was raw, but Hale gritted his teeth, forcing out words past the pain. "Go! Get word to Dorn!" Mercer hesitated, only a second before yanking Voss inside and slamming the hatch closed. As the engines roared to life, he caught one last glimpse of Hale, still standing despite the blade buried in him. Then the doors sealed and the ship lifted off. Inside, Voss slumped against the bulkhead, blood staining his sleeve. His expression was hollow. They never intended peace. Mercer clenched his fists. His voice was like steel when he answered. "No, and now we burn their worlds." The war began with fire. From the bridge of the ISS Imperator, Admiral Kale, Dorn watched the first wave descend upon the Kthari outpost world of Vosk. The fleet had emerged from the void like retribution made manifest, sleek Imperial warships blotting out the stars, their weapon batteries primed to reduce the alien stronghold to ruin. Dorn's expression was carved from stone, his gaze cold as the countdown reached 0. Commence planetary bombardment. The command was met with instant obedience. From the bellies of the warships, hyper-accelerated kinetic rods rained down, glowing white-hot as they punched through the atmosphere. The impact shattered the crust of the world, reducing fortresses to dust and ripping through alien infrastructure like parchment before flame. Dorn barely reacted. There was no satisfaction in this, no triumph, only inevitability. The enemy fleet is scrambling, reported Commander Orion Nash, his voice a calculated calm. He stood at Dorn's side, his analytical mind already several steps ahead of the battle unfolding before them. "We're detecting 28 Kthari warships, forming a defensive line." Dorn nodded. "We break them." The void burned as the Kthari launched their counteroffensive. Their ships, spined and organic in appearance, moved with erratic speed, hurling volatile plasma projectiles at the Imperial fleet. Shields flared under the assault, but the Imperator did not waver. Dorn barely spared the display glance. Full assault formation. Engage at will. The Imperial warships responded with merciless precision. Pulse cannons fired in synchronized volleys, carving through the enemy lines with methodical brutality. Where Kthari vessels fought like cornered beasts, the Empire fought like executioners, relentless and unyielding. On the surface, Captain Leon Vex led the ground assault. His boots hit the scorched soil first, dust swirling as he strode forward with rifle raised. Around him, Imperial drop troops fanned out, their exosuits gleaming under the blood-red sky. "Advance and clear the hives," Vex ordered, his voice a snarl through the comms. The Kthari had made their stand here, but it would not save them. A mass of chittering warriors emerged from the ruins, their elongated limbs bladed and lethal. Vex barely flinched. He raised his rifle, fired once, and a Kthari head exploded in a burst of amber ichor. The battle erupted in full. Imperial Marines fought with brutal efficiency. Plasma fire cut through alien exoskeletons, reducing enemies to twitching corpses. Grenades sailed into defensive positions, their detonations sending chitinous limbs flying. The Kthari swarmed, their screeches filling the air, but for every human they overwhelmed, 10 more cut them down. "Push forward." Vex roared, his blade flashing as he drove it through an alien's chest. He ripped it free, pivoted, and shot another in the face. No mercy. The battle was over within the hour. The hives burned, their structures collapsing under orbital fire. Surviving Kthari tried to flee, but the Empire did not allow retreat. There would be no survivors. From orbit, Dorn observed the devastation in silence. Below him, Voska had become a funeral pyre, its cities reduced to smoldering wastelands. The Emperor's orders had been clear. There would be no half measures. Nash stepped closer. "The Kthari will retaliate. They will try," Dorn said, unshaken. His gaze never left the dying world. "And they will fail." Across the void, the flames of war spread. The blackened ruins of Kthari Prime stretched to the horizon, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burning chitin. What had once been the heart of an empire was now a shattered battleground, its great hive cities reduced to skeletal husks beneath the relentless assault of humanity's war machine. But the Kthari would not surrender. Not yet. General Victor Rand stepped over the corpse of a fallen Marine, his expression carved from stone. His command post, a mobile fortress of steel and gunmetal, loomed behind him as the final phase of the campaign unfolded. Through his visor's tactical display, he saw it all: columns of Imperial forces advancing, the last bastions of Kthari resistance crumbling under the weight of orbital bombardments and relentless ground assaults. But something was wrong. Their forces are thinning too quickly. Commander Orion Nash observed beside him, his sharp mind already racing ahead. They're not just losing, they're pulling back. Where? Rand demanded. Nash expanded the display. Here, deep within Hive Prime. His eyes darkened. They're consolidating. This isn't retreat. It's preparation. Before Rand could respond, a transmission came through, distorted by battlefield interference. This is Mercer. The voice was strained but steady. We've located Seitharuk. He's fortified within the central hive structure. Heavy resistance. Need reinforcements. Rand didn't hesitate. Hold your position. We're coming. Miles away, Captain Rail Mercer crouched behind the remains of a collapsed tunnel, plasma bolts scorching the air around him. His strike team had carved their way through the alien stronghold, but the deeper they went, the more resistance they encountered. The Kthari were no longer fighting like a dying species, they were fighting like zealots. Mercer reloaded his rifle and turned to the two surviving soldiers beside him. They're guarding something. We breach that chamber, we end this. The detonation charge was placed against the reinforced chitin wall. A sharp nod. A countdown. Then fire and ruin. The chamber beyond was vast, its walls pulsing with eerie bioluminescence. At its center, Warlord Seitharuk stood atop a raised platform, his massive form framed by writhing organic conduits. His remaining warriors, twisted, enhanced, no longer fully Kthari, surrounded him in a final circle of defiance. But it was not their presence that sent a chill through Mercer's blood. It was the device behind them, a construct of alien design, embedded deep within the hive's structure, its core thrumming with barely contained energy. Mercer. Nash's voice crackled through his earpiece. The Kthari aren't making a last stand. They're triggering a planetary collapse. Seitharuk's mandibles parted in something like laughter. You burn our world, he rasped, his voice filled with venom and triumph. We take you with us. The ground shuddered. The air grew thick with static. The end had begun. The chamber trembled as the Kthari doomsday device roared to life. Pulsing veins of energy spread through the walls, feeding into the ancient structure like a living thing awakening after eons of slumber. The very ground beneath Captain Rail Mercer's boots vibrated with raw, destructive power. Across the room, Warlord Seitharuk stood defiant atop the raised platform, his elongated form silhouetted against the sickly glow of the machine. His remaining warriors, no longer mere soldiers but twisted abominations, enhanced by desperate biomodifications, formed a final wall of chitin and fury. They did not fight for survival. They fought for extinction. Mercer had no time to waste. Take them down, he roared, raising his rifle. Plasma fire lit up the chamber as his strike team engaged. The air filled with the screams of dying Kthari, their carapaces splitting under relentless fire. Mercer moved with brutal precision, his rifle bucking against his shoulder as he cut down anything in his path. He had no interest in a drawn-out battle. He was here for one thing. Seitharuk. The warlord leapt from his perch, his bladed limbs cutting through the air as he descended. Mercer barely had time to roll aside before a serrated claw tore into the stone where he had stood. He spun, firing a point-blank shot into the warlord's torso. The blast staggered Seitharuk, but did not fell him. The alien's modified body absorbed the energy, the wound knitting itself together almost instantly. You cannot stop what has begun, Seithuruk rasped, his mandibles flaring. This world dies, and you with it. Mercer didn't waste breath on words. He lunged, drawing his combat blade. The two clashed in a whirlwind of speed and brutality. Mercer's blade carving through chitin, Seithuruk's claws slicing through armor. Each strike was met with another, neither yielding, neither relenting. Above them, the chamber walls cracked, great fissures splitting open as the doomsday device fed on the planet's core. Molten heat surged from the depths, and a deep, primal roar echoed through the ruins of Cthari Prime. The world itself was dying. In orbit, Admiral Kale Dorn watched from the bridge of the ISS Imperator, his expression unreadable as tectonic upheavals rippled across the planet's surface. A single transmission flickered through the command channel, Mercer's voice, strained but unyielding. Seithuruk is down. But the device, a burst of static, we're shutting it down. Dorn's jaw tightened. There was no guarantee of success. The planet was already tearing itself apart. Even if Mercer succeeded, there was little time. Prepare full withdrawal, he ordered. All ground forces, emergency extraction. General Victor Rand's voice cut in from the surface, his tone sharp with urgency. Admiral, we have soldiers still fighting. If we leave now, if we stay, we all burn, Dorn snapped. Get your men out. On the ground, Mercer drove his blade into Seithuruk's throat, twisting as the warlord's black blood spilled over his hands. The Cthari leader gurgled, mandibles twitching as he clutched at the wound. Your kind will drown in its own blood, Seithuruk hissed. Then the life faded from his eyes. Mercer didn't watch him fall. He turned, breathing hard, and sprinted toward the device. His remaining soldier, bleeding but still standing, shouted over the rising cacophony. Sir, we don't have time. We make time, Mercer growled. His fingers flew over the alien controls, guided by nothing but instinct and desperation. The machine fought him, resisting, its ancient systems built to ensure destruction. Alarms shrieked in some unreadable language, the countdown accelerating as molten cracks split the floor. Then something gave, a flickering pulse, a gap in the sequence. Mercer seized it. With a final command, he reversed the process. The energy buildup halted, the device sputtering as its glow dimmed. The ground beneath them, though still unsteady, no longer threatened to collapse into the abyss. Mercer exhaled sharply. Mercer to Imperator, he rasped. The device is offline. We're getting out. Minutes later, the last Imperial dropship lifted from the shattered surface. From orbit, the fleet delivered the final act of retribution. Targeting coordinates locked onto the Cthari capital. Fire, Dorn commanded. From the heavens, the cleansing began. Planet crackers, weapons of unparalleled devastation, fell in a precise sequence, each impact unraveling what remained of Cthari Prime. Cities crumbled, the land itself fractured, and the last remnants of a civilization were erased in fire. The war was over. The fires of Cthari Prime still burned in the void, an ember of a dead world drifting through the cold vastness of space. From the bridge of the ISS Imperator, Admiral Kale Dorn stood in silence, watching the last remnants of his enemy fade into cosmic dust. The war was over. The Cthari were no more. And yet, victory did not bring the satisfaction it should have. The command deck was quieter than usual. Officers moved with subdued efficiency, their voices hushed, their faces set in grim lines. Reports flickered across Dorn's display. Casualty lists, fleet damage assessments, the cost of this war measured in blood and steel. He skimmed past the statistics. He already knew the truth. Too many had died. And for what? The hiss of the doors drew his attention. Commander Orion Nash entered, his uniform still marred with soot and dried blood. He moved with his usual crispness, but there was something in his eyes, something weary. Mercer and the strike team are aboard, Nash reported. Medicals stabilizing the wounded. No fatalities from the last op. A pause. Well, not on our side. Dorn nodded, but the weight in his chest did not lessen. And the last Cthari strongholds? Nash exhaled. There aren't any. Not anymore. The words settled between them like a funeral bell. A civilization gone. Dorn turned back to the viewport. In the distance, Cthari Prime was little more than an ashen ruin, its tectonic scars illuminated by dying magma flows. There would be no resurgence, no scattered remnants hiding in the dark, plotting their return. The Emperor had commanded annihilation, and Dorn had carried it out to the last ember. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt tired. The silence stretched until Nash broke it. The men are celebrating. His tone was careful, measured, but it won't last. They know what we've done. Dorn's hands tightened behind his back. We did what was necessary. Did we? Nash's voice was quiet, but the words struck like a blade. I saw Mercer after he came aboard. He hasn't said a word since we pulled him from the surface. A pause, and he's not the only one. Dorn closed his eyes briefly, then turned. Where is he now? Observation deck. Dorn left without another word. He found Mercer standing alone, staring out at the void. The younger man was still in his battered combat gear, his gloves stained with the black ichor of the enemy. His face was unreadable, but his posture spoke volumes, rigid, unmoving, as if letting go would break something inside him. Dorn stepped beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mercer exhaled. It's done. Yes. They killed our people. Mercer continued, his voice quiet but edged. Ambushed us. Slaughtered us. This was justice. Dorn studied him. Do you believe that? Mercer's jaw tightened. He looked away. I don't know. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. The Empire had won, but at what cost? Cthari Prime was a graveyard, and the men who had ensured its destruction would carry the weight of it long after the stars had forgotten. Dorn clasped Mercer's shoulder, a rare gesture of understanding. We did what we were ordered to do, what was expected. His voice softened. But that doesn't mean it won't haunt us. Mercer said nothing. Beyond the glass, the wreckage of war drifted aimlessly, nameless, and forgotten. The Cthari were gone. The Empire remained. And yet, as the fleet turned away from the ruins of a dead world, the victory felt hollow. The war had ended, but the scars had only begun to form.